The air grows heavy, doesn't it? Almost tangible with the oppressive weight of forgotten centuries, a suffocating shroud woven from the dust of countless ages and the spectral echoes of deeds best left undisturbed. A chilling premonition that often whispers, unbidden, to those of us drawn inexorably to the shadowed corners of human experience, to the crumbling vestiges of sanity where reality itself begins to fray, revealing the hideous abysses that lie beneath the thin veneer of our mundane existence. And it is precisely within such a dread-laden atmosphere that we find ourselves today, poised at the precipice of an ancient horror, ready to delve into the chilling narrative of H.P. Lovecraft's early masterpiece, The Tomb, a story that, despite its relative youth in Lovecraft's formidable body of work, published in 1917, already seethes with the nascent yet potent cosmic dread that would come to define his terrifying vision. An unsettling tale that peels back the layers of a young man's psyche, exposing the delicate threads of his sanity as they unravel amidst an inherited fixation, a morbid ancestral pull, and the encroaching shadow of a madness so profound, so utterly consuming, that it transcends the mere psychological and hints at something far more ancient, far more insidious, something that truly lingers beyond the veil of our understanding, beyond the comfortable confines of waking life. In the abyssal realms where dreams bleed into reality with unspeakable consequences, challenging the very notion of self and the linear progression of time, prompting us to question what insidious currents flow unseen through the bloodlines of humanity, and what dormant, horrifying truths might lie waiting to be awakened in the sepulchral silence of a forgotten past. Our journey begins, as so many Lovecraftian tragedies do, with a protagonist, Jervas Dudley, an individual marked from his earliest days by a peculiar, almost preternatural sensitivity. A dreamer indeed, but one whose dreams were often less ethereal fancy and more a troubling conduit to something ancient and darkly resonant. An individual possessed of an imagination so vivid, so unbridled, that it became both his greatest gift and his most cursed affliction. For it was this very faculty that would ultimately lead him down a path of obsession, a relentless pursuit of a spectral truth that lay buried not only beneath the earth but deep within the very fabric of his being. A young man profoundly solitary, alienated from the boisterous commonplaces of the world, his solitary existence exacerbated by his parents' well-meaning yet ultimately suffocating attempts to shield him from anything they perceived as unwholesome or morbid. A futile endeavour, given the very nature of his burgeoning psyche. A mind already attuned to the melancholic grandeur of decay and the silent eloquence of ruin, finding solace and indeed a strange, dark comfort in the crumbling edifice of the German estate, his ancestral home, a place redolent with the musty odours of antiquity and the unspoken histories of a family whose lineage stretched back into the dim mists of time. Each generation adding another layer to the already impenetrable tapestry of their enigmatic past. And it was here, amidst the decaying splendour and the pervasive sense of faded glory, that Jervas first encountered the locus of his burgeoning obsession: the family tomb. Now, this was no mere grave marker or modest burial plot, but a truly imposing mausoleum, a monumental structure of ancient granite, ivy-choked and lichen-encrusted, standing like a grim sentinel amidst the overgrown, untended wilderness of the estate grounds. A place shunned by the locals and regarded with a superstitious awe by even Jervas's own family, who spoke of it in hushed tones, almost as if fearing to disturb the slumbering spirits within, or perhaps more accurately, fearing to awaken something far more primal and malevolent than mere human spectres. For the tomb itself was of peculiar design, featuring an iron door, rusted solid and stubbornly sealed, upon which a strange, almost barbarous carving of a gorgon's head leered menacingly, its serpentine locks writhing in petrified agony. A stark, unsettling image that spoke of ancient rituals and unspeakable terrors far removed from the genteel, albeit decaying, world of the German manor. And it was this very inaccessibility, this impenetrable secrecy, that initially captivated Jervas, igniting within his receptive mind a spark of insatiable curiosity, a desire to penetrate the stony veil, to unlock the secrets held within, to commune with the long-dead ancestors whose dust mingled in the darkness beyond that forbidding door. A longing that transcended mere genealogical interest and verged on a deeply personal, almost romantic yearning for connection across the chasm of death and time, an urge to merge with the spectral past, to dissolve the boundaries between the living and the departed. A dangerous impulse indeed when coupled with a mind already prone to flights of fancy and a morbid fascination with the macabre. As Jervas matured, his fascination with the tomb deepened, evolving from mere curiosity into a full-blown, all-consuming obsession, a relentless mental pursuit that eclipsed all other interests and gradually began to define the very parameters of his waking existence, a relentless internal monologue that revolved around the granite edifice, its locked door, and the mysteries it surely held, consuming his thoughts during the day and infiltrating his dreams at night with increasing frequency and disturbing clarity. His parents, observing this deepening peculiarity, grew increasingly alarmed, attributing his behavior to a morbid streak, an unhealthy interest in death, and endeavored, with ever-dwindling success, to dissuade him, to distract him with more wholesome pursuits, to pull him back from the encroaching shadows that seemed to cling to him with an almost palpable possessiveness. But their efforts were utterly futile against the inexorable pull of the tomb, a siren song echoing from the depths of time, beckoning Jervas ever closer, for he had begun to sense, with an intensity that bordered on preternatural conviction, that within that silent sepulchre lay not merely the dust of his ancestors, but a fragment of his own destiny, a crucial, vital link to his own identity, a key to understanding the profound unease that had shadowed his entire life, an inexplicable yearning that had never found its true articulation in the mundane world, an intuition that whispered of reincarnation, of a transmigration of souls, of a past life that yearned to reassert itself, a spiritual inheritance far more profound and infinitely more terrifying than any mere material legacy. The turning point in Jervas's descent occurred when, through sheer chance or perhaps the malevolent orchestrations of fate, he stumbled upon a long-lost key, a rusty, ornate thing of ancient iron, its intricate scrollwork hinting at a forgotten craftsmanship, a relic unearthed from the decaying detritus of the German library, a dusty chamber overflowing with crumbling tomes and the silent whispers of untold histories, and with a surge of adrenaline, a visceral thrill that vibrated through every fibre of his being, he recognized it immediately as the key to the tomb, the very instrument that would unlock the door to his destiny, the gateway to the forbidden knowledge he so desperately craved. A moment of profound revelation, fraught with both exhilaration and a chilling sense of dread. For he knew with an absolute certainty that defied all reason that this discovery was not merely a coincidence, but a preordained step, an invitation extended by the unseen forces that governed his peculiar existence, beckoning him deeper into the labyrinthine mysteries of his ancestral past, sealing his fate, as it were, with the rusty turn of an ancient lock, and with a tremor of anticipation, a nervous energy that pulsed through his veins, he made his way to the tomb, the key heavy in his hand, a tangible link to the spectral realm he was about to invade. The iron door, with a groan that seemed to echo through the very foundations of the earth, a sound like a forgotten beast stirring from a centuries-long slumber, yielded to the ancient key, granting Jervas access to the hallowed, or perhaps accursed, interior. And as he stepped across the threshold, a profound transformation began to ripple through his being, a subtle yet seismic shift in his perception of reality. For within the tomb's oppressive darkness, amidst the chilling silence and the pervasive scent of decay, he did not find the dread he might have anticipated, nor the horror that might have driven a lesser man to flight, but instead a profound sense of homecoming, a bizarre and unsettling comfort that settled upon him like a shroud, as if he had finally returned to a long-lost, long-remembered sanctuary, a place where his soul could finally rest, where the fractured pieces of his identity could coalesce. And it was in this strange, intoxicating atmosphere that he began his nightly vigils, retreating to the tomb after dark, abandoning his bed in the manor for the cold stone slabs of the mausoleum, drawn to the silent companionship of the dead, feeling a kinship with them that he had never experienced amongst the living, an unspoken understanding, a shared destiny that transcended the boundaries of life and death, an act of almost ritualistic devotion, an utter surrender to the pervasive influence of the past. During these spectral nights, ensconced in the silent crypt, surrounded by the decaying remains of his forebears, Jervas would drift into a state of semi-conscious reverie, a liminal space between waking and dreaming where the veil between worlds grew thin. And it was here, in this fertile ground of his increasingly fragile mind, that the true horrors, or perhaps the true revelations, began to manifest, for he would experience vivid, hallucinatory dreams, or perhaps more accurately, memories that were not his own, visions of a past life, a past self that began to assert itself with an overwhelming, almost possessive force. Dreams that plunged him into the life of his ancestor Jervas Dudley, a man who, like himself, had been prone to solitary introspection, a sensitive soul, but one whose life had been cut short by an untimely tragic end. And in these spectral visions, Jervas became his namesake, experiencing the world through his eyes, feeling the warmth of his love, the sting of his sorrow, the terror of his final moments, a chilling transmigration of identity that blurred the lines between his own consciousness and that of the long-dead ancestor, making him question the very notion of his individuality, the boundaries of his own soul, and the frightening possibility that he was merely a vessel, a conduit for the lingering spirit of a past self, yearning for reawakening, for a second chance at existence, a terrifying prospect that gnawed at the edges of his reason, yet simultaneously offered a perverse, irresistible allure, a morbid fulfillment of his deepest, darkest yearnings. The dreams intensified, becoming more lucid, more immersive, more horrifyingly real with each passing night, each spectral journey deeper into the consciousness of the past Jervas. And Jervas Dudley, the living man, found his waking hours increasingly dominated by the echoes of these nocturnal visitations, his personality subtly shifting, his mannerisms taking on an archaic quality, his speech peppered with forgotten idioms, as if the spirit of his ancestor were slowly, inexorably subsuming his own, like a parasitic entity feeding on his very essence, and the line between his own memories and those of the dead man became utterly indistinguishable, a chaotic tangle of impressions, emotions, and experiences that threatened to shatter his already precarious grip on reality. His sanity, once merely fragile, now seemed to hang by the thinnest of threads, stretched taut over an abyss of madness. Trembling on the verge of snapping entirely, for the waking world began to seem less real, less substantial than the vivid, all-consuming reality of his dreams. A horrifying reversal of perception that signaled the complete erosion of his rational mind, the utter dominance of his spectral double, and the terrifying culmination of his lifelong obsession with the tomb. A sanctuary that had become a prison, a source of comfort that had transformed into a crucible of madness. One night, amidst the deepening shadows and the oppressive silence of the tomb, Jervas experienced the most profound and unsettling of his spectral visitations, a dream so vivid, so utterly convincing, that it transcended all previous experiences, a nocturnal odyssey that revealed the climax of his ancestor's tragic life. And within this nightmarish tableau, Jervas felt himself fully and completely embodied by the spirit of the ancient Jervas, experiencing his ancestor's last conscious moments as he lay dying, not in his bed, but within the tomb itself. A grim and chilling revelation that twisted the knife of his burgeoning madness even deeper into his psyche. For he witnessed the terrified realization that his supposed death was not a peaceful passing, but a premature burial. A horrifying mistake perpetrated by a servant who, mistaking a cataleptic trance for actual demise, had hastily interred the still-living man within the family crypt. A truth so ghastly, so unspeakably cruel, that it shattered the last vestiges of Jervas Dudley's sanity, plunging him headlong into an abyss of existential terror, a profound and absolute horror that resonated through the very marrow of his bones. For if his ancestor had been buried alive, what then did that imply for his own spiritual inheritance, for his own supposed reincarnation, for the very nature of his connection to this doomed soul? And the horrifying implications began to multiply, spiraling outwards into a cosmic dread that surpassed mere human suffering. Upon awakening from this ultimate, most terrifying dream, Jervas found himself not in his usual spot, stretched upon a stone slab, but within an open sarcophagus, a profoundly chilling discovery that seemed to affirm the absolute reality of his dream, confirming his most terrifying suspicions. For this was the very sarcophagus that had held the mortal remains of his ancestor, a receptacle of ancient dread, now disturbingly open, as if anticipating a new occupant. And beside him, almost within reach, lay a small golden casket, exquisitely crafted yet undeniably ancient, an artifact that radiated an almost palpable sense of forbidden history, of forgotten rites and unspeakable secrets. And as his trembling fingers touched its cold metallic surface, the casket sprang open, revealing not jewels or ancient coins, but a lock of blonde hair, miraculously preserved, pristine amidst the decay, and a small ivory image, intricately carved, depicting a miniature of himself, the living Jervas, a profoundly unsettling sight that blurred the lines of time and identity even further, creating an echo, a repetition, a resonance across the centuries that was nothing short of utterly horrifying. For it implied a self-fulfilling prophecy, a dreadful loop, a cycle of madness and ancestral terror that had been predestined, perhaps even perpetuated, by forces beyond mortal comprehension, a grim testament to the enduring, inescapable grip of the past. The presence of the casket and its eerie contents within the open sarcophagus served as the final, irrevocable catalyst for Jervas's complete psychological breakdown, shattering whatever tattered remnants of his sanity still clung precariously to the fragile edifice of his mind. for the sight of his own miniature, crafted with such unsettling accuracy, seemed to scream of his ancestors' foreknowledge, his chilling awareness of a future iteration, a reborn self, or perhaps more terrifyingly, his own lingering malevolent consciousness manifesting across the generations, waiting patiently for the opportune moment to reassert its dominance, to reclaim its lost existence through the unwitting vessel of his descendant, and the realization, horrifying in its full implications, that the past Jervas had somehow anticipated, even orchestrated, his return, his awakening, his eventual descent into this very tomb, this very sarcophagus, became an unbearable weight upon his already fractured mind, pushing him beyond the point of no return, into the abyssal maw of absolute madness, where the boundaries between life and death, self and other, past and present, dissolved into a chaotic, terrifying maelstrom of unreason, leaving him utterly adrift in a sea of his own making, a sea churned by the ancient currents of ancestral horror. From that night forward, Jervas Dudley became a man irrevocably lost, his sanity irretrievably shattered, his existence a horrifying testament to the insatiable hunger of obsession and the insidious grip of an inherited spectral past, for he was confined, as is so often the fate of Lovecraft's protagonists, within the sterile, unforgiving walls of an asylum, a stark, clinical environment that served as a cruel antithesis to the ancient, decaying grandeur of his ancestral home. A grim irony that speaks volumes about the trajectory of his tragic life. For his mind, once so brilliantly imaginative, now churned with the chaotic remnants of his horrifying experiences, a fractured mosaic of dreams and realities that had fused into a single, terrifying truth within the confines of his shattered consciousness. And though the doctors and the pragmatic world around him dismissed his tales as the ravings of a madman, the fevered delusions of a broken mind, Jervas clung to his story with the fierce conviction of a zealot, maintaining to his very last breath that he had indeed been Jervas Dudley, his ancestor, returned from the grave, brought back to life through some arcane, unspoken connection, some horrifying cycle of transmigration that transcended mere biology and delved into the terrifying spiritual mechanics of inherited memory, of a soul's stubborn refusal to truly die, to truly release its hold on the material plane, continuing its malevolent or desperate existence through the bloodline, infecting each successive generation with its lingering presence, its dormant desires, its unfinished business, its unspeakable terror. The ambiguity of the ending of The Tomb is one of its most chilling and enduring qualities, a masterstroke of Lovecraftian uncertainty that leaves the reader poised precariously on the edge of belief and disbelief. For while the conventional, rational explanation asserts that Jervas's experiences were nothing more than the products of a diseased imagination, the elaborate hallucinations of a mind predisposed to morbidity and susceptible to self-delusion, the narrative itself, through Lovecraft's masterful manipulation of atmosphere and suggestion, subtly yet powerfully invites a more supernatural, a more horrific interpretation, allowing the unsettling possibility that Jervas's claims might indeed possess a dreadful kernel of truth, that the transmigration of his ancestor's soul was not a mere fancy, but a horrifying reality, a spectral possession, a spiritual reincarnation that found its ultimate, most terrifying expression within the confines of the ancient tomb, blurring the lines between the subjective experience of madness and the objective reality of an ancient cosmic horror, a classic Lovecraftian tactic that denies the reader the comfort of a definitive answer. forcing them to confront the terrifying implications of both possibilities, leaving a lingering sense of unease, a gnawing doubt that resonates long after the final words have been read, reminding us that sometimes the most terrifying truths are those that exist just beyond the grasp of our rational minds, in the liminal spaces where sanity falters and the ancient unspoken horrors truly begin to stir. Delving deeper into the thematic bedrock of the tomb, we find ourselves confronted with the potent and destructive force of obsession, an insidious psychological malady that, in Lovecraft's hands, often serves as the gateway to cosmic dread and ultimate ruin. For Jervas Dudley's entire existence becomes increasingly circumscribed, increasingly defined by his singular, all-consuming fascination with the family tomb. A fixation that begins innocently enough as a boyish curiosity, but rapidly metastasizes into an insatiable hunger. A relentless, almost preternatural drive to penetrate the secrets of the dead, to commune with the spectral past, to unlock the mysteries hidden within the granite edifice. And this obsession acts as a powerful gravitational force, pulling him inexorably away from the mundane realities of the living world, severing his connections to his family, to society, to any semblance of a normal life, replacing these healthy human bonds with a morbid devotion to the sepulchral silence of the crypt, to the cold companionship of the dead. A psychological descent that is both terrifying and deeply tragic, illustrating with chilling clarity how a singular, unchecked desire, when coupled with a mind already predisposed to flights of morbid fancy, can utterly consume an individual, eroding their sanity, twisting their perceptions, and ultimately leading them to a fate far more dreadful than mere death. For in Lovecraft's universe, the greatest horrors often lie not in external monstrous entities, but in the internal landscapes of the human mind, in its susceptibility to forbidden knowledge, its yearning for truths that humanity was never meant to comprehend. Truths that shatter the fragile edifice of reason, leaving only madness in their wake, and Jervas's obsession becomes the very engine of his destruction, driving him headlong into the abyss of his own undoing. Hand in hand with obsession, indeed, often its inevitable companion in the Lovecraftian narrative, is the chilling theme of madness, a pervasive undercurrent that courses through the very veins of the tomb, transforming it from a mere ghost story into a profound psychological horror, a terrifying exploration of the human mind's capacity for self-deception and the insidious nature of mental collapse. For Jervas Dudley's descent into insanity is depicted with a meticulous, almost clinical precision, a gradual erosion of his rational faculties that begins with innocent daydreams and culminates in the complete dissolution of his identity, the utter fragmentation of his psyche, and Lovecraft masterfully employs the unreliable narrator technique, forcing the reader to constantly question the veracity of Jervas's experiences, to grapple with the possibility that everything he perceives, every spectral vision, every chilling dream, every purported transmigration of a past soul is nothing more than the elaborate fabrication of a mind slowly but surely unraveling, succumbing to the pressures of an overactive imagination and a morbid predilection. And this ambiguity, this constant oscillation between the supernatural and the psychological, amplifies the horror, making it far more unsettling than any explicit depiction of monstrous entities. For the greatest terror lies in the uncertainty, in the terrifying prospect that the horror is entirely internal, a product of one's own fractured mind, a self-generated nightmare from which there is no escape, no waking, no return to a comforting reality, only the endless, echoing chambers of an unreasoning madness, a psychological prison from which no key, however ancient, however ornate, can ever truly grant release, leaving Jervas trapped within the terrifying labyrinth of his own delusions, a living testament to the fragility of sanity and the insidious power of the human psyche to construct its own elaborate, horrifying realities. Perhaps the most profoundly Lovecraftian theme woven into the very fabric of the tomb is that of ancestry, the inescapable, often malevolent influence of the past, a concept that permeates nearly all of Lovecraft's work, subtly hinting at inherited flaws, dormant genetic predispositions, or even the lingering spectral presence of long-dead forebears influencing the lives of their descendants. And in this story, the theme of ancestry takes on a particularly potent and terrifying dimension. For Jervas Dudley is not merely fascinated by his family's history, he is consumed by it, haunted by the very notion of his lineage, drawn by an inexplicable visceral pull to the ancient tomb, the repository of his family's dust, believing with an almost religious fervour that he is a reincarnation of his ancestor Jervas Dudley, a concept that transcends mere genealogical interest and delves into the chilling implications of inherited identity, of a soul's transmigration across generations, of a spiritual burden passed down through the bloodline, and the story explores the unsettling idea that the past is never truly dead, never truly buried, but instead continues to exert a subtle yet powerful influence on the present, shaping destinies, planting seeds of obsession, and perhaps even orchestrating the tragic unravelling of minds susceptible to its ancient insidious whispers, suggesting that our identities are not solely our own, but are instead complex tapestries woven from the threads of countless generations, haunted by the successes and failures, the virtues and vices, the sanity and madness of those who came before us. A terrifying thought that diminishes the very notion of individual free will and replaces it with a deterministic dread, a cosmic fatalism where we are merely pawns in a terrifying game orchestrated by the unseen currents of our own ancestral heritage, forever bound to the spectral legacies that refuse to die, refusing to let go, clinging to the living with an almost vampiric tenacity, demanding to be reawakened, to be relived, to be remembered, even if that remembrance spells utter destruction for the descendant who dares to listen too closely to the whispers from the tomb. Beyond these core themes, the tomb also showcases several nascent Lovecraftian tropes that would later become hallmarks of his more mature, more overtly cosmic horrors, providing a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of his terrifying vision. For we see the pervasive theme of forbidden knowledge. The idea that certain truths, certain secrets, are simply too terrible for the human mind to comprehend, too shattering to be integrated into our understanding of reality, and Jervas's relentless pursuit of the tomb's secrets, his desire to commune with the dead, his yearning for ancestral understanding, ultimately leads him to a knowledge so profound, so utterly horrifying, that it shatters his sanity. An early exploration of Lovecraft's recurring motif that curiosity, when unbridled, when directed towards the ancient and the unknown, is a dangerous, often fatal impulse. For the truths that lie hidden beneath the surface of our mundane world are rarely comforting, never benign, but instead monstrous, soul-destroying revelations that expose the utter insignificance of humanity in the face of truly ancient, truly cosmic forces, and his isolation A recurring characteristic of Lovecraft's protagonists amplifies this danger, for Jervas, cut off from human connection, is left vulnerable to the insidious whispers of the tomb, with no external anchors to pull him back from the encroaching madness. No voice of reason to counter the seductive pull of the past, making him a solitary vessel for the horror to fester and bloom unchecked. An early foreshadowing of the isolated scholars and investigators who would later stumble upon unspeakable truths in forgotten manuscripts and crumbling ruins, only to meet their own inevitable, horrifying ends, their minds utterly broken by the revelations they so foolishly sought. A chilling testament to the wisdom of ignorance, the fragile comfort of remaining blissfully unaware of the true, horrifying nature of the cosmos and the dark, hidden histories that lie buried beneath our feet, waiting for an unwitting hand to disturb their centuries-long slumber. Stylistically, the tomb already possesses many of the distinctive flourishes that would define Lovecraft's unique and inimitable voice, even in this early work, giving a clear sense of the emerging master of cosmic horror. For the prose is rich, dense and deliberately archaic, employing a vast and often recondite vocabulary that lends an immediate sense of gravity, of antiquated dread, to the narrative, drawing the reader into a world distinct from their own. A world where the very language itself seems to groan under the weight of ancient history and unspoken horrors. A world saturated with a pervasive atmosphere of melancholy, of decay, of an almost spiritual desolation, a sense of pervasive gloom that settles upon the reader like a shroud, making the familiar seem strange, the comforting unsettling, and the ordinary imbued with a sinister, lurking presence. And Lovecraft's sentences are often long, complex and winding, piling on adjectives and subordinate clauses, building a meticulous, almost suffocating sense of atmosphere that gradually tightens its grip on the reader's imagination, drawing them deeper and deeper into Jervas's psychological descent, creating a narrative rhythm that mirrors the slow, inexorable march towards madness. Each carefully chosen word, each meticulously crafted phrase, adding another brushstroke to the painting of impending doom, contributing to the overall sense of pervasive dread and cosmic insignificance, a literary style that, while challenging for some, is undeniably effective in its ability to transport the reader to the very precipice of existential terror, to immerse them in the unsettling, dreamlike logic of a world where the boundaries of reality are fluid and the ancient past exerts a malevolent, inescapable influence over the fragile present, ensuring that even in this early work, Lovecraft's unique genius for atmosphere and dread is already unmistakably present, fully formed and ready to unfurl its full, terrifying potential in the years to come, laying the groundwork for the unspeakable horrors that would later populate his Cthulhu mythos. In conclusion, The Tomb stands as a remarkably potent and historically significant early work within H.P. Lovecraft's oeuvre. A story that, despite its more psychological and less overtly cosmic focus compared to his later masterpieces, nevertheless seethes with the nascent yet palpable cosmic dread and the profound psychological terror that would come to define his terrifying vision, offering a chilling exploration of obsession, madness, and the inescapable, often malevolent influence of ancestry. Themes that resonate deeply within the human psyche and continue to captivate audiences drawn to the darker, more unsettling corners of speculative fiction, prompting us to confront the fragility of sanity, the insidious power of the past, and the horrifying possibility that our identities are not entirely our own, but are instead composites, echoes, or even spiritual reincarnations of those who came before us, linking us, often against our will, to ancient unspoken horrors that refuse to remain buried, that claw their way back into the present, demanding recognition, demanding to be remembered, even if that remembrance spells utter ruin for the unfortunate souls who dare to listen too closely to the whispers from the crypt. And the story's enduring ambiguity, its refusal to provide a definitive answer to the supernatural questions it so deftly poses, only serves to amplify its unsettling power, leaving a lingering sense of unease, a gnawing doubt that resonates long after the final words have been read, reminding us that sometimes the most terrifying truths are those that exist just beyond the grasp of our rational minds, in the liminal spaces where sanity falters and the ancient unspoken horrors truly begin to stir. So if this deep dive into the chilling depths of Jervas Dudley's descent has sent a shiver down your spine, if it has awakened within you a yearning for more such explorations into the unsettling genius of Providence's reclusive dreamer, then I implore you, with the same earnestness with which Jervas yearned for the secrets of his ancestral crypt, to like this video and indeed to subscribe for more Lovecraft videos. For there are countless other tales of cosmic dread, of unspeakable entities, of maddening revelations awaiting our collective exploration, ready to drag us willingly, inevitably, into the abyssal maw of the unknown, into the terrifying grandeur of Lovecraft's unparalleled universe of fear and cosmic insignificance, where the boundaries of reality are perpetually challenged, and the human mind is but a fragile vessel for horrors beyond comprehension.